Hey guys, Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you, and we are finally getting to my review of the Cold Steel Formax. A number of you have asked about this. When is the review coming? And you've asked about it, what I think of it on Instagram and stuff like that. So the review is coming right now. Want to give you a little bit of background on this. This knife was introduced or shared with the knife world, I guess, by Cold Steel back in 2015 as sort of a high-end, mid-tech level knife that they were going to be producing in the US with high-end materials and a good solid fit and finish. I mean, their knives generally have solid fit and finish anyway, but this was going to be at a whole new level, and I think it is. Of course, it was quite a long wait for this. If you were really into it, you saw the release in 2015 saying it was coming and you were excited about that. You had well over a year to wait. These weren't really available until sort of midway through 2016. And I think that's because there were some design changes. If you look at some of the original pictures or even a video, there's a video out there floating around the interwebs from a European knife show, and the prototype they show there is a little different than the one that ultimately came to market. So, I think those design changes probably pushed things back further and further. And even when these came out and pre-orders started to be filled, they were not initially easy to get your hands on. Now there are a few of them out there. I know just recently some Canadian retailers started to have them. So Warriors and Wonders and SR Knives, I think, has them in stock now. Or I think both have them in stock now, as well as KnifeWorks. Although I looked and found nothing on Blade HQ and KnifeCenter.com, which I thought was odd. Anyway, they're a little more widely available now, and you shouldn't have too much trouble if you really, really want one. One thing I will add before we get into the rest of the review is I was a little disappointed. I thought maybe about this time we'd get an announcement from Cold Steel about, sort of the next iteration of this. They claimed that this was going to be sort of the first of a series of high-end knives from them, and we haven't seen anything else. Okay, so I don't know, maybe because this one was so difficult, they're like, holy cow, that was a terrible idea, we're not doing it ever again. Or maybe they're just waiting, and we will at some point get another offering in this line. And I know a lot of people are hoping that whatever they come up with is a little smaller than this. This is a big knife, okay? And so last thing I want to say is, by way of introduction, is about my own bias, all right? I have to admit that I love this knife. I love the shape of it. I love the feel in hand. I love the way it looks. I love the blade shape, the ergonomics. And because of that, I'm a little tempted to come off as too positive in this review because, well, I love all of that. I'm not under any delusion that somehow this is a great EDC knife. It's really much too big for practically considering it a carry knife for the average person. Okay, I'm sure there are people, and I know there are people who carry, Raja 2s and XL Talwars and, full-size Medford Praetorians and lots of different big knives and feel fine about it. And so if that's you and you're watching this going, Kevin, of course I carry a knife that big every day. Well, that's great for you. And I have carried lots of big knives and even knives that were bigger than this one. And so I understand that. I totally get it. Now, I will say I haven't carried too much that's heavier than this. This is a very, very heavy knife. And I mean, you can tell why when you look at the construction of it, but that doesn't, even though you can sort of understand the weight, that doesn't make it any lighter. It's still a real brick to carry around in your pocket. So with all of that said, now that you kind of know that I do like the knife and maybe won't take as many points away as I should because of the crazy size that it has, let's go ahead and get into the review, and we'll start with size and weight. So first, let me show you the weight on this is crazy big, around 10 ounces. I've got my scale here that I usually use to weigh knives, and I just want to show you what happens when you put this knife on the scale. It's like, what in the world? The scale can't even figure out what to do with this knife. So that I found a little bit humorous. Anyway, yeah, so that scale tops out at 8 ounces. That's why it does that. So there are a few other knives that would do the same thing to it. But I did think that was funny. You put the knife on the scale and you get an error message. Now, The weight on this is 10 ounces, which is really, really big and really, really heavy. Again, not the only knife of that weight, and there are a few out there. In fact, I have a charade sitting around here somewhere that weighs about as much as this. Now, for that weight, you're getting a knife that has a 4 1/8 inch blade here and a 6-inch handle. So quite a big knife. Okay, let me throw the ruler in here really quick. I don't normally do this, but since size is kind of a consideration on this knife, you can see there that you've got every bit of 10 inches. Okay. So, yes, this is a very big knife. And am I even going to try to suggest that this is a knife you should buy and think you're going to carry around in your, dress pants every day? No, of course not, right? This is not a practical carry knife in any sense. Not only is it huge and heavy, but in this dimension, it's over 2 inches. It's a good 2 1/8 inches thick or wide, I guess, and it's 5/8 of an inch thick. Okay, so this is a huge, huge knife. Most of the really large knives that I have reviewed have not been to this extent. Okay, this is really, really big. That said, I still love it, and in fact, I love it enough that sometimes I will even change, like I will wear different pants to accommodate this knife. I've got a couple pairs of jeans where the depth of the pocket is not enough to accommodate, and so if I decide to carry this knife that day, I'll change my pants. And that probably tells you something about how much I like the knife. When you're changing your wardrobe to accommodate a knife, that's a lot of appreciation there. So no question, it's a big, heavy beast of a knife. Let's move on to the blade, okay? And now again, there are gonna be things that I really like, and you're gonna start to see why, even though it weighs 10 ounces, I still use it and carry it. So this blade is, as you can see, a big, wide drop point blade, mostly, 3/4 of the way flat ground, nice swedge on the top, stonewash finish, 20 CV. A little overboard on the bannering. I would have liked to see this just a little smaller, more like maybe something like this. This to me doesn't stand out nearly as much as this, but I understand from a marketing standpoint they want to put the label on there larger than life. So okay, whatever. What about performance? And here's where I really appreciate this. This blade is awesome, okay? It's huge and thick. It's 3/16 of an inch thick, but, and that makes it crazy tough and durable, 20 CV, great steel, but unlike a lot of blades unlike a lot of knives that are big and overbuilt and everything else, this knife slices really, really well. In fact, I've done quite a bit of food prep with this, and it really does nicely at food prep, better than a lot of smaller knives with, blades that you would call, much more normal. So in terms of performance, this blade is awesome. And that's one of the things that really drew me to this knife and has kept me appreciating this knife, is the fact that it cuts really, really well. They've got it thin enough behind the edge. And by the way, it came very, very sharp. And I've stropped it a little bit since getting it, and that's all. It's 20 CV, so it's going to hold an edge like crazy. I have knives in M390 and 20 CV that I've only ever stropped. They've literally held an edge, for a year or more. And I will say I do take care of my edges. I hone them and strop them. But 20 CV is going to be a great performer, and certainly this one has been really, really good for all of my uses. Okay, so that's the blade. I've got to say I really, really like this blade. And maybe some of you who are familiar with the channel know that I tend to like thicker blades. I love the Lion Steel Kerr because of that thick blade and it still slices. I love the Curtis F3 because of its thick blade and yet it can still slice. And even the Hinderer, again, I like that overbuilt thick blade, but it can still cut stuff. And so, it's not impossible to do. I will say this about that, since I'm on this topic, that does tell me this: when a knife company tries to make a blade that's really thick and really hard use, that's still no excuse for it not cutting, okay? Because obviously it's possible to make a thick, heavy, hard use, overbuilt blade that still cuts really well. This is an example of it, and there are many others out there. Now, what about lockup and deployment? Well, it's a triad lock, okay? So that very, very strong lock design where forces are transferred into the stop pin and therefore into the frame of the knife instead of directly onto just that lock bar. So essentially, you know, the lock bar is going to hook into the blade, right? And that's what's going to stop it from closing. Now, though, instead of pushing just on the hook like it does with most lockbacks, you've got a stop pin here that keeps that hook from being able to be deformed easily. And what a stop pin it is. Look at the size of that thing. Okay, that is one massive stop pin. So really, really, really strong knife. Okay, definitely over the top. And is it more than you need for a locking knife? Well, yeah, of course. Now, would I say it's virtually a fixed blade or something like that? No, that's dumb to say. It's a folding knife and it still has to be treated like a folding knife. It's just a stinking really strong folding knife. And I do like that, okay? Now, let's continue to talk about the features. This is really, really smooth, okay? For cold steel folders, if you're familiar with them, this does not feel like any cold steel that I own now or have owned. It's just really, really nice. Even the triad lock, it's the easiest triad lock I have to engage or disengage. It's just smoother, and you know, there's a level of quality here that's really, really good. So in terms of, you know, the lock, crazy strong lock. Of course, the blade is stupidly solid here. No movement of any kind in any direction. And yeah, just really, really well done all the way around in that department. Okay. Moving on now to the handle. As I say, there's not a lot to say about the triad lock. Most people are familiar with it. And this one is even bigger and stronger than other triad locks. So that kind of says it all. What about the handle? Well, the handle is, of course, large. It does give you some options. You can choke up with the finger choil here, or you can be down here. Pretty much any grip you want to use is very comfortable. You know, I don't find myself using a lot of crazy, you know, weird reverse grips or draw cut grips or anything like that. But if you wanted to, you know, it's definitely doable. Okay. Of course, there's a bit of an advantage here in that a thick blade, you know, this is 5/8 of an inch thick. I mean, a thick handle, 5/8 of an inch thick, is going to be just by nature more comfortable, okay? Think about this. You know, if I bring my ruler back here for a second and I say I need you to push really hard, do you want to push really hard on this edge or this edge, right? This is going to be way more comfortable. So a thicker handle, you know, is just going to be by nature more comfortable than a thinner handle. What about construction? Well, it's very nicely machined G10, really nice texture on this, really just kind of a nice balance, okay? It's not your typical cold steel brick pattern, but it definitely is grippy. It reminds me a lot of the Ultimate Hunter. So if you've got an Ultimate Hunter and you know what it feels like, very similar to that. The jimping here on the back is really nice. It definitely grabs your thumb and holds on, but it's not so sharp that, you know, I'm not going to be in pain or missing any skin from my fingers or anything like that after using the knife. So that's a really nice touch. And I think companies more and more seem to be getting jimping right. I haven't had a lot of knives recently where I felt like the jimping was really poorly done. Certainly this one is really just what you want. Couple things here to mention. Of course, it is titanium liners, titanium backspacer, stainless steel lock bar. It wouldn't make sense to make that out of titanium. Titanium pocket clip there. However, the screws, notice there are collars or barrels that the screws are screwing into rather than putting steel into titanium, so a harder metal into a softer metal, which is not a great idea. These have inserts or barrels that the screws, threaded barrels that the screws can go into, which is a good choice and not a choice that cold steel always makes, and not a choice that a lot of knives make. I have a few different knives where you have steel screwing into titanium, and it's just not a great way of doing things. It's much better if you can have steel screwing into steel. Let's talk about the clip for a couple of minutes here. The clip is reversible, and so that's nice, especially if you're a lefty. That does make the knife very ambidextrous. However, let me turn it this way for you. Notice how there's not a lot of room here. I'm wearing 511 pants today, and you guys know how 511s have the reinforced pockets, and this is pretty tough to get in and out of those reinforced pockets. Especially, notice here how the clip comes up and then purposely tips down a little bit at the bottom. I don't know, well, I know it's to keep it from catching on things that you're walking by, but it makes it very difficult to get in and out of some pockets. If your pocket is thinner than that dimension right there, it's fine. But if not, like this, literally, the way it's designed actually does catch on a pocket and makes it much more difficult to put in. Okay, now that I'm used to it and I've been carrying it a little while, it's fine. Like any spring clip, they do tend to break in a little over time. But yeah, that one can be tight, which is, by the way, here's a cold steel that doesn't have the super grippy G10 that we always complain about, making them hard to go in and out of pocket, and it's still hard to get in and out of pocket. I'm not sure, you know, cold steel just has a thing with making these crazy tight clips. They do it on everything. All right, so that pretty well covers all of the details that I'm interested in covering in terms of, you know, the blade, the lock, the handle, everything like that. Let's go ahead and do some comparisons, starting with, of course, some cold steels. If you like this knife and you like the design, there are a number of other sort of Andrew Demko cold steels that you would probably be more comfortable with, both price-wise and in terms of carrying these around in your pocket. And the two knives that remind me most of this one are, of course, the Ultimate Hunter and the American Lawman. Both of them, you know, have the front choil. The blade shape is probably similar here, other than it's a hollow grind rather than a flat ground blade. So both of those knives, the Cold Steel Ultimate Hunter and the American Lawman, are great options, great EDC knives. And both, you know, very sort of Demko inspired. If you want a big cold steel, well, I've got a nice big cold steel here, the Recon 1. This is a great knife and very strong. You're not giving up a whole lot. You know, obviously they're different, but if you really want a big, hard-use cold steel knife, the Recon 1 is a pretty good option as well. Now, again, none of those knives, you can tell the difference as you use them and kind of play with them. These are not quite going to be as well done in terms of quality and fit and finish as this guy is, nor is the steel going to perform quite as well. It's a very good steel. CTX XHP is great, but they don't harden it enough as hard as I think they should. Maybe a ZT would be something you're interested in. We're kind of getting closer to the price point here. 0560 is a large, great knife. I really like mine, and I've got quite a lot of use on it. So that's a good comparison as well. You know, this is a popular model, so that gives you an idea of how big. You know, people know that the ZT is a big knife, and you know, this knife really dwarfs it. So we're talking about a very large knife. Finally, if you're into sort of higher end production stuff that still is usable, there are a couple of obvious choices here. The XM18 is a very popular, hard use, high end knife, and I think would stand up very well to just about anything the world could throw at it, just like I would say the Formax would do. And another obvious choice along those lines is the Curtis F3. Now, both of these knives, the Hinderer and the Curtis, are going to carry so much nicer. One thing, again, the Curtis was an example of a knife that has a blade that works really, really well, even though it's quite thick. And I gotta say, I do love that. So, overall assessment on the Cold Steel Formax. Great knife. I absolutely love this knife. It's extremely well built. It's extremely versatile. It's extremely tough and durable. I have, and I would feel totally confident, going for an overnight in the bush with just this knife. Going on hikes, doing bushcraft type stuff, yeah, no problem. It's going to handle pretty much anything you can throw at it. Although, if you're really, really worried about weight on your trip, well, you might want to look at another option. Okay, so yeah, the big story about this knife, yeah, it's well built. There's nothing that I can say they really failed at in terms of construction or design, but the big failure in this knife is just the size and weight. It's so big and so heavy that it makes it impractical for most people, even for myself. It's just that I'm willing to accept that compromise to carry it because I actually like it that much. So there you go, guys. That's my take on the Cold Steel 4MAX. Hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything else. There's some really cool content coming up, and we will talk to you later.